Rural Heritage on RFD TV is brought to you by Rural Heritage Magazine, a bi-monthly magazine featuring articles about farming and logging with draft animal power, small-scale diversified family farming and homesteading, and other aspects of our rich rural heritage. Rural Heritage Magazine, borrowing from yesterday to do the work of today. For subscription information, please call 319-362-3027 or order online at www.ruralheritage.com.
Hi, I'm Joe Mishka. Welcome to another episode of Rural Heritage TV. One of the few remaining operational roller mills in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, the Bowmansville mill in Narvon, is put in action at least once a year so the general public can witness the simple yet complex workings of this giant machine. Dating back to 1737, the mill was purchased by Nancy Bell and her late husband, Ron Funk, in 2004. Local filmmaker Dave Spees of DZP Video created an award-winning short documentary about the mill and generously allowed us to use some of the footage from that film so we could show you the machinery in action. He and Nancy took us through the mill, pointing out some of the more unique features.
I'm Nancy Bell, and welcome to the Bowmansville Roller Mill. We are in Bowmansville, Pennsylvania, in Lancaster County. We purchased the mill in 2004, and it has a very interesting history. This mill was founded in 1737, and that is 5 years after George Washington was born. Christian Good was granted a 600-acre land grant in Pennsylvania, and he settled at this site, and he built a log mill and a pioneer home. He established this as the center of the community. It became the first Mennonite meeting house. His family continued to own the property, and they've owned other mills in the area, but this is the one that survived. In 1780, they built a second mill here, and they did very well with the mills. And in 1846, they sold it to Henry Vanita. So now you see we've only had the Christian Good family running this mill. Henry Vanita bought it in 1846, and then there was a fire in 1850. It didn't destroy all of the mill, and I think we could look around and see if some of the parts of the mill were original. But he rebuilt the mill in 1850. In 1888, he added the roller mills, which we'll walk around and look at. His son took it over in the 1880s, John Vanita, and he was actually killed at the mill in 1912. He got caught up in the gear behind us, and then his son Henry took it over, and from 1912 he ran it until 1945. And that's when mills really started to go away. Because mills were originally built where a farmer could take a wagon and take his grain to be ground. It was a major industry in colonial America and in the 1800s. So we had 150 mills in Lancaster County, and they were very important to the community. They were a major source of business. But then as time progressed, there were cars, there were trucks, there were commercial mills. What we found was that these little regional mills went by the wayside. All Henry Vanita at the end could do was grind corn for animals. Animal feed was what he was doing, and he finally couldn't compete with the commercial mills. You have to run both wheels to run the roller mills.
Okay.
And you can roll this wheel just to run the stones. And you do have to walk down there, Joe, and unlock it. And yes, my husband did have me walk down there and put my foot on the wheel and say, just hold it there a minute, just hold it there a minute. This water goes through a tunnel, and it goes under the road, 625. It goes through the basement of the tenant house across the street.
And that was the Miller house.
The Miller's house was right across the street.
Side.
Yeah, this was the tenant house.
Okay, but still that property was part of the mill.
Right.
Because the barn, if you go in the barn there, Bonita's got his initials carved into the barn, right? On a door.
So the water goes under the road, under the house. You can see it when you go down the basement of the house, and then out through a tail race. And what's interesting is, and I think that we had this in 2015, PennDOT wanted to replace the bridge out here. And we were very concerned about the preservation of the mill and the preservation of that tunnel. And we had come up with plans. We'd come up with plans. We had a box culvert plan. And we also wanted things. We wanted sensors put on the building to see if the road construction would impact the structural integrity.
Sure. Right.
So that's a story that's probably going to still happen again. You've now walked back in time to 1945. And so the mill sat until 1967 when Stuart Kane bought it. And Stuart Kane was from New Jersey. And he wanted to take parts of the mill machining to a mill in New Jersey. And fortunately, it didn't work out. So Stuart Kane hired Derek Ogden, probably the most renowned millwright in America. And he restored the mill. And what's critical for you to know is the reason this looks like 1945 is because Derek wouldn't let you change anything. When you went to restore this, if the floorboards went this way, the floorboards went this way. Every restoration had to be done back to the original. Derek worked with Stuart Kane, and it was very successful. In 2000, Stuart invited the International Molinological Society, which means milling, first visit to the United States, and this mill was on the tour. And what's fascinating about that is the beauty of the mill, other than it looks just like it did in 1945, is that it has all of the original technology. It's got griststones, it's got vertical mills, and it's got roller mills. So you can walk in here and see the history of milling. It also has its original water source, which is critical. Remember I told you about how in the early 1900s, the commercial mills came in, automobiles. Well, then land started to be developed. People put in subdivisions. They took away the water sources. And the beauty of this mill is we have the original 1 acre mill race that goes up and it actually goes under the turnpike. And Henry Vonita is a legend for when the turnpike was built. He fought and fought. They say they have a pile of records this deep at the Turnpike Commission because he was not going to have his water flow disturbed. So you have to go on the other side of the turnpike and there's still a dam and the water comes down and we have a mill pond. So we have been able to maintain our water flow. And we use water wheels. There are 2 Fitz Overshot water wheels that we use. In the 1860s, they had built a sawmill because a miller couldn't mill year round. They mill when the harvest comes in and then they're milling 24/7. But they put the sawmill in order to subsidize their revenue. So we also have had the benefit of the sawmill. Key thing to know about this property is that it has a preservation easement. And as owners, we think that is critical. That will preserve this mill in perpetuity. We view our job as simply to keep this mill in as good a condition as possible so that in 100 years, somebody can walk in and think about 1737 or 1846 or 1945. That's going to be the old days. Somebody can walk in here in 100 years and they're going to see just what you're seeing here. We do demonstrate the mill 4 times a year. We're fortunate to have Mason Mannix come up from Virginia and Corey Welsham comes up. He runs the mill at Mount Vernon, the old George Washington mill. And then we're very fortunate locally, we have Levi Leinbach Jr. who comes in and runs the sawmill. He currently has a sawmill operation. So when we demonstrate the mill, you're able to see, we usually grind roasted corn because that's what the locals enjoy the most. They take it home and they make mush. It's a food staple. And we run the sawmill. My husband loved mills. And this is a funny story because we moved from Harrisburg into Lancaster County in 2000. If you recall, that's when housing prices were just skyrocketing.
Sure.
And we were looking for a place to live. We ran into a realtor down the street. We were walking, and the realtor was there washing his van. And my husband said, "Hey, can you find me a mill?" First I heard. So sure enough, within 2 times, Phil Rutt walks us in here and says, this had been listed commercial. That's why nobody else could find it. And we purchased it from the Historic Preservation Trust. And originally there was a thought of converting this to a home, but you don't spend 2 minutes in here and not realize you absolutely can't do that to this mill. So it was the love of mill, it's the love of machinery. When you look at this mill, this could be a physics class. We talk about Archimedes screws, we talk about a Hurst frame. The Hurst frame, which you can't see, you'll see in the basement, all of the machinery is within a wooden structure that is able to keep the machinery from vibrating too much and breaking the walls down. So this is, and it's the Oliver Evans model. One thing I want you to notice when you walk through, this half of the mill are the stones, this for stone ground wheat. You can see them right there. When you look at these chutes coming down, they're helter-skelter, they're everywhere. When you look over there, that's where the roller mills are. That was far more precise. All of the chutes come down evenly, and it was a far better piece of machinery. But my husband was an engineer, and he thought this was just a marvel of engineering.
Have these Overshot wheels been upgraded? Is this?
Yeah, these are upgraded. These were when the mill was restored in the 1960s and 70s. These were new wheels.
They were wooden at one time.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
And this
Sluice or that carries the water. Yeah.
Yep. Would that have been wooden too at one time?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
And what's really you'll find interesting is when we go down to the other side where the miller would, I call it their operation panel, they pull a wooden bar that then pulls this wooden bar up and it opens the water.
That's
Okay.
the
So
word.
the miller can stand over there, pull this bar, and it goes across the mill and opens it so the miller can have the water flowing.
Yeah.
So there are 3 control items down there, but that is still on a wooden system.
Yeah.
One for each wheel. There's
Yep.
another one down there.
Right.
Further down.
Yeah.
That beam there is shimmed. That wooden beam. That. Oh, I guess
Yeah, it looks like it is shimmed. Yep. That was a
Because
quick fix probably or something.
shimming is the secret of milling. I cannot tell you how critical that is.
It's
And
adjustable. It's
Right.
something where you can.
and when we first ran the very, very, very first ran the mill,
It
and
wobbled a little bit.
the main spur gear popped out, and you've never seen a lot of older men run so quickly, and they had to shim it. What had happened is the big spur gear had settled. So that is an amazing bit of shimming up there, though, isn't it, Joe?
Yep. That's nice.
We have our Christmas lights up. We inherited that from Stuart King.
I'm sorry, Nancy.
No.
Your husband passed.
Yeah, he passed away.
I'm so sorry.
Yep, so are we.
No doubt. No doubt.
He loved the mill. He really did. So, like you see the boards here.
All right. So this is where they engage.
Yes, you can see.
And-
You're good. Not your first mill, is it?
Well, no. And I was in one this morning actually. So.
Right, so that's the pole I talked about.
Right.
That comes over here. You're right, it engages the water. Okay. That's the one that when you're standing at the control, I'll show you the control panel.
Yeah. Okay.
But we've had these rebuilt. You can see this is where the water, and see there's the wheel for the sawmill.
Hi, I'm Joe Mishka of Rural Heritage Magazine. I'm on location of one of the many events we cover that celebrates our rural heritage. If you enjoy our show, check out our magazine, where you'll learn more about the people that blend the past with what works today. You can save almost 20% off the newsstand price by subscribing at ruralheritage.com or chat with us at 877-647-2452. That's toll-free, 877-647-2452.
What we have learned over 20 years of owning the mill is that we have to do maintenance on the mill. So we usually find a week in the spring and or a week in the fall. And we bring the millers up because they know how to do the maintenance on the mill. And we have them do maintenance for a few days, make sure everything's running. And then we open it to the public for 4 of the days. And it's usually a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. We do not open on Sunday. So we have it open, we get school groups in. That's a marvelous learning experience in here. And they really enjoy it. And we have private groups. You know, if somebody wants their group to come in, they do it Wednesday and Thursday, and then Friday and Saturday is far more open to the public. No, they're usually in October. We pick a
Okay.
week when the Millers are
I see,
available.
okay. And
So
so you don't know October 2024 when it might
we
be?
haven't said it yet, and we were
Okay.
just talking. We may end up doing it in May. But what we'll do is we'll post it on the Historic Preservation Trust website.
Okay.
And so those days move every year depending on the availability of the Millers, the weather, what we have going on here. But that will be posted on the Historic Preservation Trust of Lancaster County's website.
And you have this wheel, it's protected with canvas. You've got
Yes.
it covered. Yeah.
Matter of fact, we left it uncovered for a few years, and that was a problem because it rusts. You
Sure.
absolutely have to keep that one covered.
Sure.
Yep.
Gotcha.
That's
Yeah,
probably
yeah.
to keep the flotsam and the jetsam and the critters out.
Yeah.
So the miller would adjust this stick, and
Okay.
it would, as you saw it went across the mill, it would open the gate so the water would start to flow over the overshot wheel.
So that stick pulls away from that pin.
Yes.
Move it to where you want it, you put it back into
Into a
different
pin,
hole.
correct.
Wow.
So now you have your water flowing. And you want your grain to get down into the stones. So you pull this.
Okay, hang on a second. I'm
Yeah.
looking around.
There you go.
So we did water source. So you see where the water comes in. And then you have the stones. And we can walk over this way if we watch our heads. Here are the two original grindstones.
Well, before we get to the stones,
Yep.
there's a drive shaft that's
Nipper.
bringing the power, and that's coming.
Shall we go downstairs?
That's downstairs.
See the other stairs? Here we go. Yep.
Track it.
Yeah.
And this is going to be part of our story. Katie and I were figuring out where this was last night. This is how the miller would let the adjust the grain coming in and out.
Sure. The flow.
The flow, exactly. So let's go here, see the gears. I think about how hard they worked. This was incredibly hard work.
Right. And it's
You'll-
dangerous.
Very dangerous. Well, yeah. You'll see where the grain would come in, and we'll show you that. Outside they had a lift would take the grain up, and it would flow down, and then this is where the grain would go out. After you were bagged, there's an old-fashioned bag wagon, and it would push and go out this door. But you asked about the gear.
Yes, ma'am.
Here is the great spur gear. This is your
This
great
gear.
spur gear. You can see the axle that comes in from the large water wheels that comes down through here. And you see Mason when he comes in, they grease it with vegetable grease. And
Crisco.
this would engage your stone.
The gearing that's wooden.
Yeah, it's
Wooden.
wooden gears. Yeah.
Okay, and there's an
wooden
issue.
to iron.
You're having to do the wooden repairs on those gears, which Derek insisted. And you are now seeing the full Hearst frame. This is a frame that was built to hold the machinery so that it wouldn't hit the walls and the sides of the mill.
Suspended away from the walls. Yeah, yeah. And the wood provides kind of a shear pin. So if those would break before the whole thing would fall apart.
Yes, good point. And the first time we ran the mill, that large housing that's down there is what popped.
The hub there.
Yes,
Okay.
and they came in and put the wood shims in
Okay.
to get it to the right level.
Yeah. Okay.
And we've never had a problem with it since.
Cool. All right. So then now we've got these are turning,
Right,
and here's the bottom of the.
stones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Terrific.
And we can go see what this is not quite how it's supposed to be, but the miller would stand here,
Okay.
And I would like to add that they say the best millers were women
Okay, I'm not surprised.
because they had the finest hand for the grain.
Okay.
So the miller would adjust this stick, and
Okay.
it would, as you saw it went across the mill, it would open the gate so the water would start to flow over the overshot wheel.
So that stick pulls away from that pin.
Yes.
Move it to where you want, you put it back into the
Cor-
pin.
into a
different
pin,
hole.
correct.
Wow.
So now you have your water flowing, and you want your grain to get down into the stones. So you pull this.
We now have 4 volumes of America's Rural Yesterday books with photos of farm life 100 years ago. Fieldwork has images of horses in the fields working the ground, planting and harvesting the crop. Barn and Farmyard shows farmers putting that crop in the barn, silo, or corn crib and caring for poultry, hogs, cattle, and more. In At Home and in Town, farm families prepare Sunday dinner, relax in the parlor, drive to town by buggy or wagon, and visit the general store. Finally, Early Tractors has over 250 photos of early American tractors like Alice Chalmers, Oliver, John Deere, Farmall, Minneapolis Moline, and many more. These photos are of new tractors back in the day and show how they were configured coming out of the factory. Buy any of these books for $24.95 plus shipping. When you buy 2 or more, the price per book goes down, all the way to $17.49 per book when you buy all 4. To order, just call 1-877-647-2452 or order online at www.ruralheritage.com. That's 877-647-2452.
I'm Danielle Kepperling, and I'm the Executive Director of the Historic Preservation Trust of Lancaster County. We are at the Bowmansville Roller Mill. So it's one of the last operating mills in Lancaster County. At one time, there were over 300 mills in Lancaster County, and now there's only a handful left, and very few that are totally operating. Some of the buildings are still there, but they're not operating. So our mission is to educate and advocate for the preservation of our built history.
Okay. And so it's not necessarily to promote tourism per se, it's more to protect the historical artifacts that we have.
Yes,
Is that right?
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
Tourism's a nice byproduct of historic preservation, but our goal is to try to make what makes Lancaster County special, retain that. Otherwise, it'll just look like all the rest, any other place in America.
Sure, right. In addition to this kind of a location, what other kinds of businesses or structures do you guys help preserve?
So we do. We different municipalities will call us to help with making their ordinances or things like that would help preserve at a local level. We also, a homeowner will reach out for technical advice or a property owner, and sometimes people call because there's a building that's in danger and they want us to help save that. But we do have preservation easements, and that's what we have on this building, and that's the only thing really that will preserve a building into perpetuity.
It protects it.
It protects it, yeah.
Because you can't, regardless of the best intentions of the particular owner, you can't predict what they're going to change their mind to do,
Right.
Or the next owners.
Or the future owners, and that's usually when we get those calls, is people are starting to think of.
Okay.
Yeah, I have them outside, from the outside, having a bucket coming up.
Yeah, thank you, Katie. When you say about getting the chills, it's when you walk up the stairs and you see 1885 written, and you see their initials.
This program is available for purchase. To order your copy, please call 319-362-3027 or visit www.ruralheritage.com. Rural Heritage is a bi-monthly magazine dedicated to draft animal farming and logging, as well as other aspects of our rich rural heritage. It is published by Mascot Press, which also offers a complete line of back-to-the-land books, DVDs, and calendars. Call or write for a catalog or subscription information, or visit our website at www.ruralheritage.com.